There's a new era in Washington with the election of President Joe Biden. President Biden got 81 million votes in last year's election, the most of any presidential candidate in American history. So Democrats should pat themselves on the back, right? Not exactly. Although Joe Biden broke the record for most votes in American history, Donald Trump ended up with the second most amount of votes in history with 74 million votes. Posters were predicting a blue wave, and what ended up really happening was that the Democrats lost seats in the House, and they barely got a Democratic majority in the Senate. It is clear that although we got rid of Donald Trump in this election, the Democrats have some soul searching to do in regards to their message and strategy to win elections. As soon as the election results started to become finalized, a civil war broke out between centrist Democrats and progressives. Centrist Democrats are blaming progressive positions such as defund the police and getting rid of fracking as the reason why they either lost their races or barely squeaked out a win. Progressives have been quick to point out that progressive causes around the country have passed, such as $15 minimum wage in Florida and an increase on the taxes of the rich in Arizona to fund public education. Also, no member that publicly backed Medicare for All lost their race. So who is right and who is wrong? Should these two sides work together or should they try to shut each other out? The answer to those questions is going to play itself out not just for the next 4 years, but many years to come after that. There is a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, and I truly believe that as a progressive, it is a battle the progressive left cannot lose for the sake of the country. The reality is that the Democratic Party has sold out the middle class ever since it chose to abandon its working class economic policy positions that stem from Franklin D. Roosevelt and chose to embrace a neoliberal model of economics. The New Democrats, or centrist Democrats, that formed during the 1980s made the decision that they needed to appeal to conservatives if they were going to win elections, due to the popularity of Ronald Reagan and his conservative revolution. The centrist neoliberal model has been the dominating brand for Democrats ever since the 1990s. The problem with the Democrats embracing the centrist neoliberal brand is that it meant the only thing that differentiated the Democrats from Republicans were shallow identity politics issues. Both parties from there on out embraced a neoliberal corporatist model of economics, and it was to the detriment of working class folks. That brand of politics worked in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. But that is not the case anymore. Economic conditions have worsened for working people in part because Democrats chose to embrace the centrist neoliberal model that favors the corporate world over working people. 80% of working class people live paycheck to paycheck, wages have not kept up with inflation, and unions, which served as a mechanism to represent working class interests, have been decimated. This is the reason that the economic messaging of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders has been so popular over the last couple of years. Although the messaging was popular for Bernie Sanders, it did not result in any wins for him in both his presidential runs. This reality should be a message for the progressive movement moving forward. Yes, the establishment did everything in their power to stop Bernie, but Bernie also made grave mistakes that we as progressives should learn from. I believe that the first dire lesson to learn is removing the Democratic Socialist label. The crazy part is that Bernie Sanders isn't actually a socialist. The technical term for his ideology is a social democrat, which in its simplest terms means strong social programs that are supported by a capitalist economy. Two of the main characteristics of the socialist ideology are the abolition of private property and having workers completely take over the means of production, two stances Bernie has never advocated for. While politicians like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were able to overcome the hurdle of their labels, they come from strong liberal districts and states. Bernie Sanders did not perform well in the rural areas of the country and did not appeal to older folks. If progressives want to win those in rural America and win older folks, progressives have to change the approach. The approach should be to embrace our market economy. China didn't become the world player that they are today by having a command economy. They became a world player when they opened up their markets. The progressive approach should be to embrace the market economy, but to fight for a capitalist system that works for all, not just the few. Progressives cannot be seen as antagonists to capitalism. Capitalism is intertwined with the American identity. Instead, the message should be about what kind of capitalist system should we have. Do we want a capitalist system that caters to the needs of corporations and the ultra-rich, or a capitalist system that encourages fair competition so the small businesses and working people can thrive? We can still have our critiques of capitalism, like how it puts profits over the human condition, how technology is detriment to workers, and how it looks for the cheapest wages at the expense of other workers. It is going to come down to how you frame the argument, and that argument should have the same appeal to small business owners as it does to working class folks in rural areas and urban areas. Speaking of rural working class folks, we have to remember that our system of government favors areas with smaller populations than those of our American cities. The Senate gives each state 2 senators. California, with its large population, gets the same number of senators as Montana, which has a fraction of the population California has. The progressive message has to reach the rural areas of America, or we will continue to give Republicans election wins. Economic populism should be the central ideology of progressives, but instead of having capitalism as the enemy, it should be corporatism. Help small business owners, workers, minorities, the poor, and the older generation, as well as rural folks, understand that the people responsible for current conditions are the elites and corporate America. It is billion-dollar corporations that have infiltrated our political system to suit their needs. Corporations that have crippled the middle class through trickle-down economics, who have advocated for trade deals that have sent good-paying jobs overseas, who push for private prisons in order to take advantage of cheap or free labor, which disproportionately affects minorities, and it is big corporate agriculture that is monopolizing competition at the expense of rural folks. Our opponent is corporate influence that is destroying our country. This opponent can serve as a unifying measure to bring working people of all kinds together across the country. Progressives have to demonstrate that what we care about is preserving an America that works for all, not just the billionaire corporate class. For some reason, the right has been successful in labeling leftists as somehow un-American. It is a ridiculous notion considering that progressives are for policies they believe are best for America. Any person that is involved with public servitude has to have some underlying degree of patriotism. How progressives have let themselves be labeled as un-American is a testament to the right's ability to control narratives. Progressives have to take back control of the narratives by branding progressive policies and ideals as pro-American as possible. I'm not saying progressives have to go and hug flags like Donald Trump, but the framing of progressive policies have to be aimed as pro-America. As I wrote this, we are sitting in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, which has exposed many of the vulnerabilities working class Americans face. This includes homelessness, healthcare and access, gig work, debt, childcare unaffordability, inadequate worker support, and an inaccessible long-term care. I feel that the former issues are the result of the current power structure we have today. It is due to a system that has long ignored the conditions of working class people. It is due to a system that bends their knee to the billionaire corporate class at every corner. These billionaire corporations fight against any policies that can be beneficial to the people. Now, with one of the greatest health pandemics the world has ever faced, the United States has been exposed on their vulnerabilities. The progressive movement can help prevent the system by touting an economic populist message that puts the interests of workers, small businesses, minorities, the poor, the older generation, and our rural populations on the same playing field as the interests of the billionaire corporate class. Theoretically, if we have a movement where progressive politicians are not taking in money from the ultra-rich and billionaire corporations, then we will have a system that would be more willing to address the issues mentioned above. I believe in this movement, and I believe this movement can help cure many of the issues Americans face, especially the great ideological divide that we are currently experiencing. The progressive movement can create an economy that works for both working people on the left and right. This movement is America's only hope from saving it from total corporate control and from curing us from the divide we are currently experiencing.